Pakistan is facing conflict between its government and the Pakistani Taliban. Kaldor uses the term new wars to describe contemporary violent conflicts. Unlike wars of the past which were fought between countries, new wars are fought within countries' borders over issues of ethnic, linguistic and religious identity. Shields suggests that unlike old wars, which involved horrific acts of mass violence in staged organised battles, new wars are fought in and around civilian settings, meaning increasingly more children are becoming victims of conflict. This presentation is going to argue that globalization is the cause of conflict in Pakistan. Globalization refers to the interconnectivity of nations of the world, sharing culture and trade. There are two perspectives of globalization that are relevant for this presentation. Firstly, one perspective is globalization as conflict, also known as world systems analysis. And this suggests that globalization is promoted by global elites, rich and powerful countries, to further their advantage. The world systems analysis is characterized by an unequal core-periphery relationship, where a relatively small number of countries are referred to as core countries because they have a large amount of capital and are at an advantage for trade, giving them power. However, a much larger amount of countries make the peripheral and are dependent on the core countries. This creates problems for nations on the peripheral as they lose control over some of their policies. For example, some aspects of a country's education policies are not determined by the national government, but rather declarations and commitments of international organisations. One example of this is Education for All, where virtually every country in the world has agreed that they will commit to giving their citizens free compulsory education, whether or not it is in the country's best interest. Shields suggests that this view of world systems analysis is that often global policymaking is in fact the agenda of the most powerful actors in the world economic system, national governments of core countries acting in their best interest. In terms of Pakistan, this perspective of globalization would suggest that as Pakistan is a developing country, it would be a periphery, and the West is made up of a lot more powerful core countries, giving the West power over them. The Taliban movement in Pakistan, also known as the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan (TTP), resents the fact that Pakistan has an alliance with the West, and it wants Sharia law to be imposed on Pakistan. The Sharia law is from a set of austere religious beliefs seen as medieval by liberal Pakistanis. They focus on aspects such as women not deserving the right to be educated and that they are inferior to men, when Education for All and other international incentives mean that the government is providing girls with some education in Pakistan. The second perspective is globalization as culture, also known as world culture theory. This perspective views globalization primarily as a diffusion of cultural values. World culture theory claims that international organizations are key agents of globalization. Through their declarations and commitments, these institutions establish and disseminate the values of world culture. World culture theory also suggests that most of the changes associated with globalization are caused by shifts in underlying cultural values and not by the economic factors or functional considerations. Finally, world culture theory suggests that cultural changes are surprisingly consensual and not a result of hegemonic power relationships. Pietists suggest that globalization has been accompanied by several clashing notions of cultural difference, and discusses the idea of the clash of civilizations, which is an aspect of global policies which centres on interactions between the West and the non-West. He suggests that the argument centres on Islam and states that the centuries-old military interaction between the West and Islam is unlikely to decline. This could be considered as an opposition to the idea of cultural homogenization, an aspect of globalization which goes beyond the widespread dissemination of physical objects and instead is the diffusion of a way of being, ideas and values shared all over the world. This homogenization, which is caused by globalization, is creating tension in countries like Pakistan, where extremist groups oppose Western culture merging with their own and begin to start attacking their own people. When the Pakistan Taliban took over Swat Valley, it banned education for girls and closed down over 900 girls' schools, and 120,000 girls were pushed out of the classroom. This made headlines when 14-year-old education activist Malala Yousafzai stood up for her right to have an education and later became a target for the Pakistan Taliban for her views on women's education. Shortly after this interview, Malala was shot on her way home from school by a member of the Pakistani Taliban. She survived the attack and has since won a Nobel Peace Prize in her legacy for promoting girls' access to education and has become a global icon, standing in stark contrast to everything the Pakistan Taliban stand for. Less than a week after accepting her Nobel Peace Prize, the deadliest Taliban attack Pakistan has ever seen struck as gunmen walked into classrooms, opening fire and killing 132 children and 9 teachers. The TTP, now to this current day, has attacked over 1,000 schools. Over 9 million Pakistani children don't receive a primary or secondary education, and 22% of children who legally have to be in school are not. Conflict towards education has resulted in death to many teachers and children. This caused decreased access to schools, schools not being opened, security of children travelling to schools are under threat, and there are less teachers willing to teach. Through all of these issues, it's also important to take into consideration the effect of war, bombings, death and destruction can have on a child's mentality and lifestyle. Without a proper education or facilities to help children overcome any issues they are facing from the effects of war, it's difficult to provide change for the children in Pakistan. The UN Secretary General's report stated there are repeated issues with poverty, resources and education. They do, however, highlight the importance of education as being a tool for improving conflict areas. Through the transmission of skills, values, knowledge and attitudes through generations, it's a start to peace building and conflict transformation. The Sustainable Development Goals were created by the United Nations system. These are 17 goals were set up as a plan of action for people, planet and prosperity, and to seek to strengthen universal peace and larger freedom. The UNESCO Global Monitoring Report on the Sustainable Development Goals suggests that education is at the heart of achieving these goals, but the report also makes it clear how far away we are from actually achieving them. UNESCO proposes that to address gender inequality, critics advocate a more nuanced, holistic understanding of the concept of gender. For example, gender is not equivalent to girls and women, but it is understood that unequal gender relations also harm men and boys, and that the involvement of men and boys is integral to improving gender power relationships. Education can also have a powerful transformative effect in enhancing gender equality in society and improving agency, voice and participation for vulnerable populations, many of whom are adolescent girls and women. Calwick reports that in the village of Mangar Kot in the Swat Valley, parents are sending their daughters to the nearest boys' school in order for them to get an education due to all of the girls' schools being so far away or closed down. In a conflict zone, children are more likely to get harmed if they have to travel to get to school. So educating boys and girls together in the nearest school is a solution both to reducing the inequality and also keeps children safer, as well as combating the discrimination which the Taliban represents by believing girls should not be educated. Freire suggests that the sooner or later being less human leads to the oppressed to struggle against those who made them so. In order for this struggle to have meaning, the oppressed must not, in seeking to regain their humanity, become in turn oppressors, but rather restorers of the humanity for both. Therefore, something needs to be put in place to stop children from becoming radicalised and support a peaceful society. Since 2003, Over 85,000 Afghan students have benefited from peace education, a preventative strategy implemented by Help the Afghan Children. This will help the future generation of the country learn how to deal with conflict in a peaceful manner. Using role play, the students bring home what they have learned and teach their parents and family. Bringing some of these incentives like this to Pakistan could give birth to a new generation who are less likely to become radicalised and part of extremist organisations such as the Taliban, as well as giving children the tools on how to lead a more peaceful life.